This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. We are joined today live and direct all the way from Jordan Village in Niagara by winemaker Gabriel Demarco. How are you today, Gabriel?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me, Jamie.
Brilliant. Well, really nice to see you, albeit over the wonders of Zoom. It's been a little while. And today we are going to be speaking about a number of wines, but we'll start off with this one here. This is your famed CSV 2019 estate-grown Riesling. There we go. And tell me a little bit about this wine. This is one I'm very familiar with, not particularly this vintage, but I know this wine going back many a year.
Well, it is a foundational wine for Cave Spring.
Yeah.
And it's CSV standing for Cave Spring Vineyard. Any label that carries that moniker, kind of in the house of Cave Spring, we talk about it as being the height of expression of any given vintage for that variety. And CSV has always been about driving origin and ripeness, and then pushing the envelope in winemaking within the context of what is expected of the variety, but also looking to challenge the palate, begging for cellar age, begging for a meal to be built around it, kind of thing. So CSV is one of those iconic labels and kind of brands of the brand that we are very passionate about.
Is there anything specific with regards to the vinification of the CSV compared to your other wines?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because we talk about the portfolio from, say, the entry-level Riesling to the CSV, which is the height of our portfolio. And there's no shortcuts at the entry and spare no expense at the top. It's all about origin and vine age. But there are, of course, nuanced differences in the CSV in terms of economy of scale and what we'll do to make the CSV. So the CSV comes from 3 microparcels at Cave Spring Vineyard, and then they're all kind of managed from pruning to harvest specifically for where they're going in the CSV. And then within the CSV making, we'll take a section of that and we'll do a full orange wine with just a small amount of it. So make an orange Riesling, and we'll barrel age that for the time Sur Lie. Skin soaking, and a kind of a more harder press, to be honest, with full phenolic extraction. We'll take all parts of that grape and utilize it for flavor and texture. Not really worrying about some of the ideals in winemaking for Riesling, like temperature control and things like that, letting them be warm and gain body and texture to carry those phenolics. And then, of course, letting it go dry. And so all those components kind of age will be brought into the winery with the unified vision from pruning, but then we'll pull them into component parts and making. We'll do like the skin ferment will be very phenolic, and the skin soak will have like a gentle phenolic texture, and they'll age Sur Lie separately in the wood vessels. And then at blending, we'll bring them back together and we'll find that perfect sweet spot for the balance between tension, acid, mouthfeel, all those things.
When we're talking about vine age for those 3 blocks that you have within the Cave Spring Vineyard, what are we talking about?
Yeah, so the 1 microparcel is 5 rows in our original block of Riesling, which would be planted in the mid-70s. The other 2 blocks are not we have older Riesling than the other 2 blocks. They're in their early 30s, so they're not young by any stretch of the imagination, but they're just in this, they begged to be part of the CSV. And when we say 3 blocks, you can stand in the original Riesling block and walk to the second block in less than 3 minutes, and walk from that block to the block. You're kind of within this little like subset of land at Cave Spring, but each parcel is in its own unique terroir zone, if you will. The shoreline vineyard is kind of high density between 2 ravines. You get this tannic structure of Riesling from that. You get Lamont Riesling, which is just southbound, sitting and nestled at the base of the escarpments. You're picking up some more groundwater, but you still get this lush. It's always the ripest of microcruise. And then the H6, the Home Farm 6 original planting, always has a very low pH. and so kind of hits its phenolic ripeness or skin ripeness in low 20s, and the pH, no matter how ripe we get it, stays just hovering around high 2s, low 3s. And so you bring that luscious ripeness from Lamont, that structure from Shoreline, and that pH from Home Farm, and you get that melange to put together a beautiful blend. And so the average vine age would end up being somewhere between 32 and 36 years old.
Now, we've spoken about these 3 different blocks. Is there clonal variation amongst these 3 blocks?
No, they're all clone 21, actually.
Ah, right. Okay.
Yeah, 21 different rootstocks, though. And the interesting thing about rootstocks in Ontario, a lot of the research, because we talk about viticultural zones around the world, and the variables that they face environmentally are always profound. We talk about some of the issues in California with forest fires and drought. Issues in Burgundy, and the list goes on. And in Ontario, of course, even though we are protected by the lake and the escarpment, our variable of concern primarily is the winter damage. And so the Cool Climate Enology and Viticulture Institute at Brock University has done a lot of work looking at if there is a way to increase winter hardiness in the core varieties by clone and rootstock companionship. And they found the answer to that to be yes. And so our rootstocks are the rootstock clone combinations are different in each of the blocks.
I see.
And you can see the oldest block is on the rootstock and clone of choice when they planted it. And then this, Lamont being the youngest of the 3 blocks was on, we had the most knowledge at that point. So it's on the kind of current knowledge base. And then you have Shoreline 2, which is the second oldest, and it's on the kind of it's on a different rootstock into the same clone. And so I guess the point of my ultimate story here is that they behave differently based on those relationships.
Right. Now, the CSV is known for its age worthiness. This is the 2019. How do you feel that I was going to say the average, there's never an average CSV because they always speak very much to the vintage, but what would you say is the kind of longevity of most CSVs?
Well, from experience, we find that they get to 20 years very easily.
Yeah.
There's of course evolution there, and you don't open a 20-year-old CSV and expect it to show like the youthful fruit and acid structure. However, you beautiful evolved lanolin, the acid and the harmony and the phenolic structure just create a velvet presence on your mouth, in your mouth rather. And 20 years easy. Of course, the right cellar conditions are always ideal, and they help with that. But we're opening the 99 CSV, and that is it's the first year of CSV, and that's still holding beautifully. So.
It's interesting. I mean, knowing how wonderfully these wines can develop, this is still tasting quite wonderful in its youth. How was 2019 as a vintage for Riesling in these 3 plots?
Well, thank you for that. And 19 was if every vintage was like 19, there'd be a lot less stress.
Right. Okay.
It was we had a cooler, kind of moderate growing season, but we were still getting nice heat units, a moderate amount of rain, nothing crazy. And then we had a beautiful long harvest with nice diurnal shifts going into October, and allowed us to hang fruits and relax and pick it when we were ready. And so I really think that 19 is a bit of a sleeper vintage, and it doesn't get the attention. It was surrounded by 18 and 20, both of which were like hot, dry years. So everyone loves those, of course. But 19, the elegance, the weight, the structure that came out of that vintage is a bit kind of underrated, if I could say that. And
for your palate personally, when it comes to Riesling and your own Rieslings, do you prefer the cooler vintages or the warmer vintages?
I have to walk the middle on that, to be honest. And this is the truth. I don't tend to have a preference.
Right.
Maybe for dry Riesling at like say I guess like a mid-tier dry Riesling, it's easier to make in a hot vintage in that
you get
the heat and it's like the acids are if not the same as the cool vintage, the extract is greater in the hot vintage, so like it holds the acid better, say. But from no, I don't. I kind of, to be honest, I have one of the things that I love most about winemaking in Niagara is no matter if it's a hot vintage or a cool vintage, every vintage is quite unique. And our goal in this beautiful little truncated growing season we have is to really maximize the vintage, the ripening season for every level of wine. So, whether it's the entry to the CSV, like you always have to push the harvest window for each of those, kind of pull as much extraction and weight and texture and ripeness. And I find that in a hot year or a cool year, those challenges are very similar. And I enjoy the expression of both.
I hear you. I hear you. Now, having worked both as a winemaker and an ambassador for Cave Spring over the years, less so over the COVID years, but what are the best examples of pairings, food pairings with the CSV Riesling that you've witnessed over the years?
Well, that's a good question, actually. It's funny you say that. As you say that, I kind of usually I would be my mind would flow with ideas. Having coming through COVID and like dining less and being at home more, and kind of opening CSV and not really eating anything with it, just almost decanting it.
Yes.
Cold, letting it warm up, and then seeing what temperature does to texture and mouthfeel, and then kind of maybe funneling it back to the bottle to revisit the remaining portion the next day to see how it opens and evolves. So I mean, that also, I enjoy doing that with CSV, how the structure kind of comes into play with different temperatures, different time open. That's
your academic approach there. But when you're talking about pure pleasure with food, can you wind back to those dinners that we used to all once have together?
I know, we used to get together. Well, firm cheeses for me, for sure, like that, like challenge the acid, like I love that about the firm cheese and the Riesling. I had like roasted mushroom, Brussels sprout, like with a good amount of fat in the cooking process. Where it's not the biggest of meals, but like it has that texture, that umami, and then which it kind of meets the Riesling in the middle, and then the acidity kind of pushes through, and you share some earthy tones on the palate there. So things like that, I keep going some classic stuff too, of course, where you get like some sausage and bratwurst and things like that, which of course are natural companions culturally from the grape's origin. But kind of those richer, but on the lighter side of rich in terms of you're not going to need a steak with it, although I'm sure you can find a way to do that if you had like the right accompaniments with the cut of meat. But no, definitely lighter fare, whether it be lighter cuts of meat or styles of meat, or lighter vegetable dishes that have been like prepared with a good amount of fat or umami in them to kind of carry that acid, to accompany that acid. And then kind of the earthy tones of the Riesling.
It's interesting tasting this when it's relatively young. And I haven't tasted CSV for quite some time, so it's a real pleasure to taste it today. But I'm reminded of this kind of savory character it has. And there's a wonderful salinity, that kind of, I don't like to use the M word too often, but there is that minerality, obviously, that's inherent to the wine. But it's even in its relative, well, in its youth, it's still, the structure is still absolutely fantastic. I mean, it's just, it's a real flagship wine for you. And I understand why. It's really nice to have a chance to taste it with you today as well.
Well, thank you for that. Funny, I love that note about salty minerality. We, of course, don't add salt to the wine. It's that is and I think if we were to sit and taste through the portfolio of Riesling and move into the Chardonnay and the Pinot Gris, the salinity would be in the whole portfolio. Like, of course, in the CSV, I feel it shows that just the most tension and most
of course.
But then, like, it's everywhere. It's in all the wines, and that's just the terroir that unique is very well. There's other thing that gives salinity, of course, but they're so expressive in Cave. Like it's I love it. It's one of the signature attributes of the soil and the way in which the soil holds water, and then the way in which the grapes get nutrients and the airflow and the movement. You get that beautiful texture just in the grapes as they come into the winery.
Super, super. Now, when we thought about doing these tastings, I was thinking, oh, it'll be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But this wine, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this wine. It's by no means a simple wine, a multi-layered, multi-dimensional, absolutely fantastic. Thanks very much for sharing it with us today, Gabe. Really appreciate that.
Oh, such a pleasure. Thank you for having us, and thank you for the compliments. I'm really happy that you enjoy it.
Superb. Take care out there. Bye for now.
Take care.